Just as scientists revere legendary scientists, chess players study the lives and games of chess greats. As you become acquainted with these giants of chess, you'll find that some attract you more than others. At times, that attraction is how they led their lives, while others feel empathy for the horrific hardships they suffered through. But most pick a chess hero because they love his style. And by going over his or her games, you can dream that someday, somehow, you'll be able to play like that too. Though Grandmaster games might seem impossible to fully fathom, rest assured that there's something to be learned from all of them. Even if you pick up one very small thing from a particular game, that's another big step towards chess improvement and chess enjoyment too, since chess is so much more than just playing. I picked 4 chess heroes for this lecture. You might want to study one or all 4 of them in more detail. Perhaps you have fallen in love with some of the other players we discussed in previous lectures. Morphy, Alekhine, Tal, Kasparov, Philidor, Steinitz, Tarrasch, Nimzovich, and all the other world champions and grandmasters from the past and present. Our first chess hero is the amazing Cuban player Jose Raul Capablanca. Some players get good by hard work, and the world's best mix talent with a manic work ethic. Capablanca, though, was born with some sort of preternatural mega talent. When he was 4 years old, he would watch his father play chess against a friend. During one game, Capablanca noticed that his father played an illegal move, which was also overlooked by the opponent. The 4-year-old pointed this out, which shocked both men since they weren't aware that the child knew the rules, much less understood the game's nuances. Deciding to crush his son in a game and teach him a lesson, young Capa wiped him out. They immediately played another, and once again, the result was the same. Life went on. He played a bit of chess, eventually went to Columbia University to study chemical engineering, and by 1908, left the world of academia when he realized that chess was more fun. The fact is, Capablanca was lazy. And where university demanded serious work, his chess talent allowed him to rule the world without any effort at all. By 1911, it was clear that he was the world's second best player behind Emanuel Lasker, who at that time had held the world championship for an amazing 17 years. In 1913, things got even rosier when he accepted a position in the Cuban Foreign Office. One often hears about dream jobs, but this one is hard to beat. He was basically an ambassador at large, meaning that he would travel all over the globe, all expenses paid, and he was expected to play chess and rub noses with dignitaries at parties. He pocketed any and all monies from his tournament victories, and the job itself promised lifelong financial security. Keep in mind that Capablanca was extremely handsome, world famous, dignified, good-humored, and irresistibly charming. This and his newfound wealth gave him an enormous competitive edge, since most of the other players struggled to pay their bills, while women pretty much viewed them as nerds. Capablanca, on the other hand, was fawned over by women across the globe. His only worry was who he was going to dance with next. Capablanca didn't have a care in the world, and detractors, pre-internet trolls, claimed he was conceited. In response to this, Capa wrote, "Conceit I consider a foolish thing. But more foolish still is the false modesty that vainly attempts to conceal, which all facts tend to prove." As a player, he was almost impossible to beat in his prime. He was a positional player, the world's finest endgame player, along with Emanuel Lasker. And his style was clear and almost devoid of errors. In 1921, Capablanca won the world championship by beating the 52-year-old Lasker in a match. Lasker held the title for 27 years. However, the world was shocked when Alexander Alekhine claimed the title by beating Capa in a long, grueling 34-game match in 1927. One reason for the defeat is that Alekhine, though not having Capablanca's talent, was a much harder worker than the Cuban, and by 1927 was only slightly weaker than Capa, who thought he was far, far stronger than Alekhine. Another reason is that while Alekhine was concentrating on the match, Capablanca hit the talent every night and had a good time. As always, he thought his talent would lead to an easy victory, and was shocked when it didn't. Emanuel Lasker once said, "I had known many chess players, but only one chess genius, Capablanca." Sadly for the Cuban, when it came to facing a prime Alekhine, genius wasn't enough. Capablanca died in 1942 at the age of 53. Capablanca, like all great players, excelled in every phase of the game. If he had a weakness, it was the openings. He once said that he never looked at an opening book. However, though he wasn't a cutting-edge opening theoretician, the positions he got were always very much to his taste, which in my mind is a completely different kind of talent. The following game, the first game these two legends played against each other, is a great example of Capablanca's crystal clear style. Capablanca's white, Alekhine, who eventually took his title, was black way back in St. Petersburg, 1913. Watch how he plays in an almost placid manner. Alekhine had no way to somehow challenge this crystal clarity that Capablanca was very famous for. D4, D5, C4, C6, E3, Knight F6, Knight F3, E6. This is actually an opening that's very popular today. Capablanca plays a rarer move. The idea is that if black ever takes this pawn on C4, the knight will take up a nice post on C4. So, knight BD7, bishop D3, bishop E7, both sides castled, all normal stuff, nothing exciting. And now Alekhine captured on C4 and played C5. What he wants to do is take on D4 and leave white with an isolated pawn, which is something we've studied in several different lectures. So, knight E5, he took, and there's the isolated pawn. And we're back to the question, is it weak or is it strong? It gives extra space, controls the key E5 square, but, of course, it could turn out to be a weakness, and don't forget the weak D5 square. So both sides were kind of happy with what's going on. Knight B6 and knight G5. That's a strange move. One would wonder, why would he do this? Well, it's a good question. The first threat, though, is pretty obvious. H7's hanging. It's hanging to G5 knight, to the D3 bishop, and to the queen. And so you really don't want him to rupture your kingside. So he played G6. But what about this move? Just H6. It hits the knight and guards the pawn. You actually get mated. Bishop H7 check. If you take it, the queen comes in and mates you. So you just move. Knight takes pawn check, rook takes, and there's a mate. So, of course, Alekhine didn't fall for that. So he played G6. And now Capablanca retreated. So he just moved his knight twice. Why would he waste that type of time? The reason is that he forced the weakening of some dark squares in black's camp. So king G7, bishop G5, knight BD5, rook A C1, dominating the C file. White has been going after a kingside attack, but he realizes that such things can't be forced against good defense. With that in mind, he begins adding some long-term positional pluses to his overall list. As you know, rooks are very comfortable on an open file, so Capablanca brings his rook into play. This is something experienced players are very aware of. They always make sure that all their pieces are in play. Bishop d7, queen to d2, and Alekhine tries to trade some pieces. Bishop takes, queen takes, bishop e4, and bishop b5. And Capablanca simply moves his other rook into the middle of the game. Queen d6, and now bishop takes d5. This is a great moment because though he can recapture twice, one move loses. If he plays queen takes, which is a mistake, rook to c5 forks both the bishop and queen and wins a piece and the game. So he had to take with the pawn. And suddenly White's isolated pawn is no longer on an open file. It's totally safe, and White's knights are beautifully posted, so White has a superior position. And now queen a5, hitting the bishop and also eyeing the c7 square. a6, guarding the bishop. Queen c7, heading for an endgame. Queen takes, rook takes. All these moves are very clear. Trading a piece, all of a sudden the rook's in there. And now you're threatening this pawn. And you have a rook on the 7th rank. And aside from threatening this pawn, you threaten a move like knight g5 at some point, where you're hitting f7 several times. And all of a sudden, black is lost. So he plays h6 to keep him out of that square. Capablanca takes the free pawn. Alekhine grabs the file, thinking he's achieved something. b3, the rook comes in, and he just chases the knight, or chases the bishop away with a4. The bishop moves, and now Capablanca moves this knight away. And suddenly, because of this pin, he's threatening to capture on g6, and the pawn can't move because the rook is pinning that pawn to its king. h5, knight h takes g6, rook e8, rook f7 check. And suddenly, from a very clear, pristine position, everything seems quiet. All of a sudden, black's king is getting routed. The king moves and f4, and that takes away the g5 square from the king, and white is trying to get a mating net now. f4 creates a mating net. You just take away the squares from the king, it can't go anywhere. And now after 4, a5, knight h4, and suddenly there's a threat of knight to f5 mate. So, of course, he has to deal with that. So he gives up his rook desperately. F takes, the king marches forward, g3, king g4, rook g7 check. These are all forced moves. King h3, the king is in the heart of white's position, but it's not going to get out. And now, knight to g2. And Alekhine resigned because nothing will stop a mate on f4. For example, bishop f3, knight f4, mate. If you're attracted to this kind of pure chess, where an attack can turn into an endgame, which can once again turn into an attack, then Capablanca would make the ultimate chess hero. It's no wonder that he was often referred to as the chess machine. Though there were always women who enjoyed chess, and though many of these women were strong amateurs, there was no female that could challenge a male international master or grandmaster until the Georgian Nona Gaprinishvili appeared in 1961. She dominated women's chess for 17 years and, due to her skills, raised the bar for all women players. Since then, more and more women took up the game, and more have turned professional. Now, women from all corners of the globe excel at chess, and many of them have earned the Grandmaster title. But before Nona Gaprinishvili, there was someone I left out. Vera Menchik was born in Moscow in 1906, and it was only after she moved to England in 1921 and started taking lessons in 1923 from Geza Moroxi, who happened to be one of the world's finest players, that her talent showed itself. To say that she dominated every other female player in the world is an understatement. She won the Women's World Championship tournament in 1927 and defended her status 6 straight times. I'll put this in perspective. Her combined record in all 7 World Championship events was 1 loss, 4 draws, and 78 wins. That's mind-boggling. The world chess champion, Alexander Alekhine, had this to say: "It is totally unfair to persuade a player of an acknowledged superclass like Miss Menchik to defend her title year after year in tournaments composed of very inferior players." Fortunately, she was given a chance to compete in some very strong tournaments against many of the world's best male players. At Carlsbad, 1929, she faced Albert Becker, who was a very strong Viennese master. He insulted her by announcing that she didn't deserve to be in an event of this level, and that anyone who lost to her would immediately be a member of the Vera Menchik Club. Clearly, this was a club that no man wanted to be a part of. As if this was a Hollywood movie, Vera beat the loudmouth Becker, making him the first member of that club. But as time went on, it became clear that he wouldn't be the only member. She defeated quite a few famous players, including legends like Sammy Reshevsky, who at one point might have been the best player in the world, and Max Euwe, who took Alekhine's World Championship title in 1935. Unfortunately, Vera, her sister, and her mother were all killed by a V-1 flying bomb attack in London during World War II. She was only 38 years old. Vera Menchik's white against the condescending Becker, which made him the first member of the Vera Menchik Club. Menchik had outplayed her opponent from move 1 onwards, and now she has pressure against c6 and a protected passed pawn at e5. From here on out, she handles the position brilliantly. Knight to d4, perhaps coming in to f5. Her opponent prevents that. Knight to b5, hitting the rook, and it can't be taken because there's a pin along this file. Rook to d7, saving the rook. And since you can't take the knight, she just moves her king into the game. This turns out to be an incredibly deep move, though it doesn't look like it at first glance. h6, g4, and Black insists the knight has to go away. So she moves it back, once again attacking this with 3 different units. So Black has to once again protect it. And now she pushes this pawn up, and that's 2 connected passed pawns. And her opponent, not wanting the king to enter into the position, plays g5 to keep the king out. And now she played king g3. At first, one is left wondering what this does, since the f4 and h4 squares are untouchable, and White's king doesn't seem to have anything to do on g3. I suspect that Becker still didn't fathom her plans. Bishop b7, h4. Now he realized he was doomed. He certainly didn't want to play this because it allows White's king to penetrate into Black's camp. But a neutral passing move, for example, like bishop to a8, would allow the rook to enter the enemy position by trading, rook h1, and the rook is coming in. So, sadly for Becker, he captured back, king f7, and the king is now all over him. He lashes out finally, and now the knight goes back to that square on b5, and he still can't take it because the pin on this file. At this point, he was totally discombobulated. The problem is that the knight not only attacks the rook, but it also is coming into d6 where it's going to fork the king and rook, and so the game is basically over. He made it worse by moving the rook here to d7, and then he got forked. e6 check, losing a whole rook for Black, and he gave up. And I'm sure he ran out of the room very quickly. I can't imagine the joy Menchik must have felt when she beat this guy. Capablanca couldn't have played this endgame better than she did. Let's turn to Bobby Fischer. Everyone has heard about the crazy chess player who won the US championship a record 8 times and snatched the world championship from Boris Spassky in 1972, thereby single-handedly ending the Soviet Union's chess hegemony. And we have also heard about his ravings and his antisocial behavior. Yet, though he often was impossible to deal with, those that knew him well pushed aside his madness and remained faithful to the sweet man that was hiding underneath. Upon hearing of his death in 2008 at the age of 64, Dick Cavett wrote, "Among this year's worst news for me was the death of Bobby Fischer. Towering genius, riches, international fame, and a far from normal childhood might be too heady a mix for anyone to handle. For him, they proved fatal. I'm still sad about his death. In our 3 encounters, I became quite fond of him." After beating Spassky, Fischer was the toast of the town and was viewed as a true American hero. He appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was a guest on a Bob Hope special. Businesses begged him to endorse their products, and America, which was never much of a chess country, suddenly became mad for the game. Here's how Fischer's sister explained the magnitude of what Bobby achieved. Bobby did all this in a country almost totally without a chess culture. It was as if an Eskimo had cleared a tennis court in the snow and gone on to win the World Tennis Championship. Then, when untold wealth and fame was literally pounding on his door, he refused to defend his title. He nixed all the endorsements, and he more or less vanished. Here's an example of the innocent way he saw the world. When offered a fortune to do a commercial pushing a particular product, he refused. When asked why, he said, "I don't use that product." Hanging out with friends and loved ones and becoming more and more unhinged, as time went by, he finally reappeared 20 years later. And, well, let's just say that things didn't go well. But I'm not here to criticize Fischer, defend him, or justify the nasty, sometimes crazy things he said. Only those that were close to him and knew who the real Bobby Fischer was have the right to do that. I'm here to discuss his chess. And when it comes to chess, he had no peers. A true student of the game, he made deep studies of all the players we've discussed in these lectures, borrowed old, forgotten, inferior openings and breathed new life into them. And mixing scary talent and an amazing work ethic, molded his game into something that was literally ahead of its time. Fischer was, in a way, a chess chimera. He mixed Alekhine's super deep opening studies with Lasker's unstoppable will to win and Capablanca's clarity and endgame mastery. And the result was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, chess player who ever lived. Bobby Fischer's white, and he has a nice space advantage thanks to the advanced d-pawn versus black's d-pawn, which doesn't gain as much space. It's Fischer's move, and he plays c4, gaining more space. Notice that there isn't anything too dramatic happening. Instead of rushing at his opponent, white will quietly gain as much space as possible while making sure that black's pieces remain relatively passive. This kind of strategy is known as playing for 2 results. White will win or white will draw. With proper play, black can't win a position like this since there are no targets for him to attack. In fact, all that can be said about black's position is that it's solid. Black responded with knight c6, knight c3, h6, and Fischer just brings a rook to the file. Bishop f8, and I'm sure Georgi was happy to trade 1 rook. He's just trying to draw the game. Fischer just keeps quietly developing his pieces. Black develops his. You notice the difference in development. White's development, an aggressive place for the bishop. Black's development, the poor thing, is still in its own camp. Queen d2, queen c8. He's trying to trade more pieces, so he wants to bring the bishop here to do that. So Fischer lashes out, d5, hitting the knight. The knight moves to b4, and now Fischer does a little trick. Knight e4, uncovering on the knight while also threatening to damage black's kingside. So, not wanting to have his structure destroyed, he has to take the knight, and after bishop takes, black's knight over here is no longer threatening white's bishop and is actually threatened by the queen. So the knight retreats. Fischer still wants to stop black from playing bishop f5, so he now puts his knight on a really nice square, d4, depriving black of that square. Knight c5, hitting the bishop, bishop c2, and a5. This stops white from chasing the knight away with b4. Rook e1, and suddenly Fischer has the only open file. Queen d8, and everything seems quiet, almost like Capablanca. And then rook e3, and suddenly things aren't so quiet. Fischer intends to go rook g3 and actually create a powerful attack. b6, rook g3. Now, of course, the threat is bishop takes h6 because there's a pin along this line. So the king has to move off. He goes there, and Fischer now makes a very interesting move. Knight to f3, taking his knight away from that really nice square. Why did he do that? The reason is that he wants to bring his queen up to d4, which would then control this diagonal and would allow him then to capture this pawn on h6, and the guy could not recapture because there's a pin. All these different diagonals ending in material loss for black. So black now has to do something and do it fast. So he plays queen e7, Fischer plays queen d4, and he says, well, I can't allow this, and he goes queen f6, and Fischer is delighted to trade and enter a big endgame where he has all the advantages. Black's pawn structure is awful. This is very typical of Capablanca, and Fischer followed that. Doesn't matter about attack. If you attack and mate, great. But what Fischer really liked is clarity. And clarity means create weaknesses, build, and eventually break your opponent down. No muss, no fuss, and no risk. So after g takes, the knight comes back to d4. All right. So in this case, black now takes the open file. White doesn't want him to penetrate on the file, so white offers a trade. And unfortunately for him, the trade is bad too, because these weak pawns are still there. They're going to be there forever. That means that black is going to suffer forever. So he decided, okay, I need to get counterplay, so I'm going to go over to b8 and try to push this b pawn and open a file for myself. Fischer plays b3. Black carries out his plan. And now Fischer just sinks into this delicious square. And now h6 is basically hanging in the wind. So bishop d7, and Fischer has won material. And when Fischer wins material, it's not going to go well for you. So black attacks the bishop, and white moves his rook, ignores the attack. He threatens mate in one, rook g8 mate. Black takes the knight, stopping the mate. White recaptures. Now his bishop is safe. Black moves his knight in, threatening the rook. And after check, king h7, now we have a pin along this line. And after f3, a piece is won, and Georgiou had had enough and gave up. Born in 1994, Hou Yifan was a Chinese prodigy who won the Women's World Championship at the age of 16. She lost her title in 2012 and regained it in 2013. She is, by far, the strongest female player in the world, and, behind Judith Polgar, already the second highest rated female player in history. I added her to our chess hero list because her career is only just beginning, so you can follow her progression for many, many years to come. I also added her because she is a thoroughly delightful young lady that, unlike the many egomaniacs at the top, is very easy to like and root for. One other reason she's on this list is that the other three chess heroes were all positional players, while Hou Yifan is a wild attacking player. Hou Yifan is white in a game that shows her energetic, combinative style. She starts out by putting the rook on the 7th, which we know is always a good idea. Queen d4, and now she goes for the king because that 7th rank rook is aiming in that direction. And she even allows a check. Bishop e6. Her opponent thinks, well, great, a free pawn. Let me take it. She moves her king to safety. But now there's a problem. This f7 pawn is ready to die. So her opponent tries to protect it. And then she takes it anyway. Her opponent takes back, queen e8 check. The rook can't move because it's pinned on this line. So it's time for the black king to make a run for it. King g7, queen takes f7 check, king h6, queen f8 check, king h5, and this is kind of sad. You don't see kings running around in modern play. Queen e7. I think Hou Yifan was probably in time pressure, and she actually had a better move, but this is fine. Often what people do when they're low on time is they'll repeat the position once or twice to get closer to the time control, and then they'll go for the kill. So after her opponent retreated again, she checked again, and then it was time to do something. And still in time pressure, she played bishop h3. It was a better move, but this also wins. Queen c2, and now a beautiful finish. She gives up the bishop, leaving only her queen to really take care of things. King takes, the pawn checks, king h5, and now the beautiful finish. She actually enlists her king into the mating attack. King h3, g5, g4 check, and we have a rare pawn mate, h5 mate. Finding a chess hero to emulate and learn from is an important part of your chess education. This is where everything comes together. One game can give you insights into tactics, positional patterns, openings and endgames. Iconic chess games like the ones we just looked at can give you all that, as well as the richness of chess history. So, where do we go from here? Play chess, of course. You might embrace postal or email chess, which allows you to spend several days for every move. You can be one of the millions of internet blitz warriors, whether early in the morning, during a relaxing afternoon, or when the quiet of night envelops you. Go to your favorite chess site and bash heads with a man in India, then a lady in Australia, and one more game against someone in Russia. Whenever you travel, you can visit various chess clubs around the globe. You can play family members, friends, or coworkers. You can take the plunge and compete in tournaments. Remember that losing a game where you try your very best can teach you far more than winning. You also know enough, if you're so inclined, to follow chess history and savor the lives and games of the chess legends. The world of chess is enormous, international, and multifaceted, and now you know everything you need to be a part of it as fully as you like. I want to thank you for sharing this journey with me, and I hope you get as much pleasure from the game as I have.